The following presentation was recorded live for the International Association of Square Dance Callers' 33rd Annual Convention. We take you live to the Renaissance Suites Hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina, where our session is just getting underway.
33rd Annual CALLERLAB Convention, and we're in Charlotte, North Carolina, just in case you didn't know where we were tonight.
I'm sure glad you know where you are.
Yeah. How many of you are here for the first time, your first convention? Well, those are the people that we want to hand this handout to. I mean, if it's your first convention, that's the audience we want to reach with this handout, because let's make sure you guys have one first, because it'll give you a little bit of an idea on the makeup of CALLERLAB and some of the history of CALLERLAB. Now, with us tonight, we have two panelists, actually. We had a third panelist, but she missed her flight, so Bev Sutter won't be joining us at this particular session because she's not due to get in until about 11 o'clock tonight, so she will not be here. We have been scouting out for the vice chairman of that committee, and we have not been able to find her as yet. So we've kind of informally called upon Terry Mallard, who might be able to help us out with that information. But without further ado, let me introduce Martin Mallard, who has been calling for, well, since 1955. And
actually longer than that, but I'm not going to tell you how long.
Anyway, let's, from Saskatoon, Canada, have a nice hand for Martin Mallard.
First thing I want you to do is stand up, find somebody you don't know, shake their hand, and introduce yourself. Well, let's get a mic that works here. Okay, how's that? Okay, if you talk to enough people. Yeah, I started it. Those of you that are in the back seats, if you'd move forward, this is not church. You don't have to worry about collections or anything. You know, I just want you to learn one thing. You may have shaken the hand of one of the next chairmen of CALLERLAB. You never know. I can remember coming to our first CALLERLAB in 1974 and sitting out there where you are, and looking up on the stage and wondering who that old boy was. And the crazy part of it is today I'm one of those old boys, having only missed one. And my wife has missed two. So we know what CALLERLAB is about. And one thing I want to point out is, I'm going to ask you this question. What is CALLERLAB? Anyone care to stick up their hand? CALLERLAB is you. And nothing else. It is you that wants to keep square dancing in front of the public, that wants to keep it something that's dear to your heart, something that you can share with people. When you have a dancer come back to you and thank them for the things that square dance has done for them, you can realize what CALLERLAB has done for you. Without CALLERLAB, we would not be where we are today. When I started calling, things were, every area was different. We had traveling callers come through, they taught what they wanted to teach us, and we tried to teach it to our dancers, and nobody could dance with anybody else. Today we can dance throughout the world and go to any dance in any country and dance with those people. And CALLERLAB did that by standardizing a lot of things in our square dance world. And it was started by some very dedicated people. I could read a 5-page article here, but I really don't think that reading tells you what CALLERLAB is all about. If you want to read this, go into your computer, dial up callerlab.org, and you'll get this 5-page thing. And it is interesting. It goes back to the very start with Pappy Shaw, back in the 30s. How many have ever seen the book Cowboy Dances? Have anybody ever used it? It is a Bible of early square dancing. And some of the callers here were part of that at one time. And we have a history of traditional dancing, quadrilles, squares, and everything else. And square dancing has been a product of the community. It's been a community thing that brought us together, that made us a civilization, I think. It's been part of us. And without that, we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't. When you get 8 people that can cooperate, it really helps. But to dig into it, our CALLERLAB is made up of a board of governors. There are 25 elected members. You elect them, you select them. They put their names forward, and you vote on them. And they come into the board, and they try to do the things that you want them to do. And they represent people from all around the world. They're not just from one state or from one country or anything else. They are international. Out of that board, we have 6 members who are our working committee, really. We call them the, executive committee. But they meet twice a year to go over the business part of CALLERLAB. And we also, out of that, we have a foundation, which was started a few years after CALLERLAB started. And that foundation looks after donations that we get from people who leave it in their wills, from fundraising of the dancers, the callers, and so forth. It looks after some of the advertising and a great deal of the charitable things that we do. The flyers that you can get from CALLERLAB are published by the foundation. And how many have used them in their classes? Come on now, I don't believe that. They're the greatest advertising thing you can get. Because they cost you a little bit, about 10 cents a piece, but you'll never get a better piece of stuff to put out in front of the public. It's made up of the same board. Basically the same people run it as run our CALLERLAB itself, but they're separate monies. They're separate operations completely. And we say, what have we done? How many know exactly what we have done? I'll just speak a little louder. That better? Okay. I'm going to lick this thing if I'm not careful. We have done the dance programs which you all know about. And those dance programs have been standardized throughout the world. And we're still working with them, trying to make them just that little bit better. Every year they get tuned, I guess is the word I would use. And I don't think there's anything wrong with them, really. We like to fiddle with them. We're getting better definitions, better understanding of what we're calling, better understanding of how we're teaching. We had quarterly selections at one time, and the quarterly selections did one thing, which is rather interesting. We had a tremendous growth of oddball or different choreographic figures that came out over quite a number of years. And out of that, we had actually the Plus program arrived from some of the material that was screened during the time of the quarterly selections. And then the Plus program became a program in itself. And a lot of the stuff that we tried in mainstream years ago is now in the advanced and the further up the line. We're still writing choreography. We're still writing new stuff. But it gets screened and put in its proper place. And it's usable, some of it. We have a code of ethics, both for the dancers and for the callers. And thank heavens for that, because ethics amongst our dancers and amongst ourselves is very, very important. I had one person, and he happens to be my son. He runs his own business, and I said, "What is ethics?" His definition sort of stopped me short. His was doing the right thing when nobody's watching. So I think that's one of the things that we have to think about. We are having a discussion on ethics, by the way, down the line. We've instigated a caller coach program, which there are a number of us are caller coaches, and we've had to learn how to teach callers to call. And that in itself is rather an amazing process when you pick up the caller coach manual and go through it. This was written by CALLERLAB people, set up to help you as a caller learn how to teach callers. And it's a worthwhile manual to have. We have curriculum guidelines, how to teach your dancers in an orderly manner. And they're all being modified. That's what part of our board does. We have committees within that board that are terrific. There are things that we have learned to do, learned to help you, and we're there for that very reason. And I do hope that when you get out and start spreading your wings around CALLERLAB, that you stay with us, that you'll be part of those committees. We have mainstream committees, advanced committees, intermediate committees, whatever you want to join, it's there. There's some 40-some-odd of them? 40-some-odd committees? I'm checking with the boss here. He should know these answers. We managed to get the BMI and ASCAP licenses. We have no idea what it would have cost us if we didn't get those licenses for you to use the BMI and ASCAP music. The same thing happened in Canada. We got SOCAN, which was a miserable organization, until they recognized what CALLERLAB was, and they worked very closely with us in Canada to become what they are here. We have the same type of organizations. We've had many labs all around the country. We've had actually one convention in Canada, in Vancouver, and it was a great success. And I hope we have some more in other places of the world. We are an international organization. So that sort of covers what we are. How many know what the programs are here? Who knows what the CDP program is? Community Dance Program was a program that came out for people who wanted to just be casual dancers. We have the basic is coming back, I hope. We have the mainstream, we have the plus, we have the advanced 1, 2, we have a C1, C2, C3. These are all programs that are monitored by CALLERLAB and the committees that look after them. So we're a very active organization. Unfortunately, we don't have the membership that we used to have, but we're hoping that you will continue and keep it going. I mean, I've been a member ever since it started, and I'll be a member as long as I'm available. And I hope that you have a dedication like the rest of us here do, and will be what we are today. Someday one of you may be up here doing exactly what I'm doing, and I really hope you are. If you have any questions, right now is the time to ask them. You may have questions about CALLERLAB, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Very good, Martin. We do have a portable mic, and we'll make sure that we run this around and allow anybody that has questions to get that mic. John, if you would, that would be great. So if you do have a question, particularly on any of the history or anything that Martin has covered so far, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll get the mic to you, and we can ask those questions. Okay?
Don't be shy.
Not too many shy callers? Yes. We've got a question. Just a minute. Let's put that question on the microphone.
How do your committees communicate with each other since you're all over the country?
What's interesting is that we used to communicate by mail, and nowadays most of our committee mail-outs and the information goes through the home office and through email. And for those people who don't have email, then it goes out mail-wise. So, for instance, I'm chairman of the Mainstream Committee. We have 307 members. Most of the responses I got back from previous mailing were by email. And I would say there was probably another maybe 5 to 10% that came by mail. It's been marvelously much more efficient. And there are almost 30 committees. And if you have gone through your packet and looked through this listing that particularly spells out all the sessions that we have scheduled at this convention, and then you go ahead and look through the write-up of what that session is about. It'll give you some great information on every session. In the back of that is a list of our committees. And so if you're particularly interested in a committee, we invite you to be a member of that committee, and this is a great time to sign up. You can sign up any time, but there's also a little thing in your packet that says I'm interested in such and such a committee, and you can turn it into the registration area, in the CALLERLAB registration area, and become a part of that committee. Also, even though you're not a member of a committee, you are still invited to attend the committee meetings. There's a couple of them that are just with the members, I believe. John, there's like the Caller Training Committee, Caller Coach Committee. Yeah, there are a couple like the caller coaches that is just for caller coaches, but by and large you're invited to attend those meetings and come in and participate and listen up, and in most cases, feel free to speak up on anything that you have on your mind, or if the subject comes up and you're interested in saying something in it. The important thing is stand up, take the microphone, state your name, say where you're from, and go ahead and talk. The main thing is we want this information on the microphones because so many of these sessions are being taped, and it's really important to get that information on the microphone so that when these tapes go out, or we're listening to these tapes in our cars, that you don't have this long blank with somebody talking in the background, you can barely hear them and that kind of thing. So we're gonna ask and really try to stick to it with our moderators and our panelists that if you're going to speak, get up on the microphone and speak, and that really helps out those tapes and makes that a whole better presentation. Any other questions?
What are the requirements for getting into CALLERLAB? Could you explain that?
That's a good question. We at one time had some very stringent requirements on becoming a member of CALLERLAB with the number of dances that you might call per year. I think at one time it was like 50 dances a year for 3 years. We've relaxed that requirement, knowing that there are some callers that are so busy with other things or maybe just do certain events. And so for that reason, and I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I believe now we are 12 dances per year, and that would be for a 3-year period to become an active member of CALLERLAB. Now you're still invited to become an apprentice member of CALLERLAB, or an associate member of CALLERLAB, and those are 2 other categories that we now have. All of this information, the neat thing about it is all of this information is available on the website. That website really encompasses a great deal of detail about CALLERLAB, not only our dance programs, but about the specifics of our membership requirements. So that's our current requirement for members. Does that answer your question, Jerry? Okay, very good. And by the way, in case you didn't know, that was Jerry Helt, one of our members from the very beginning of CALLERLAB. Yes, hold on, we're going to take a mic, we'll bring that mic right back.
What's the difference between an associate caller and a regular caller?
Actually, an associate caller, I believe, is a caller who no longer calls the active requirement. In other words, they may be a caller who even has kind of retired from active calling, but is still a member because they're still a valuable source of information, and their input is valuable to CALLERLAB. So they stay active, they still receive issues of direction, and we'll talk a little bit more about direction in just a minute, but most of you are, how many of you are familiar with direction, our newsletter? There's a lot of work that goes into that, and it takes a little bit of time to go through it and read it, but it's fairly easy to do, and it's a great information source for almost anything that you're interested in learning about CALLERLAB. So stay up with that.
Jay Solville from Northwood, New Hampshire. Those many dances that you call per year, wouldn't that also include, as far as being a full member, include how many times you need to be at CALLERLAB convention itself, like 2 years consecutive, 3 years consecutive? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yes. How many do you have to attend a CALLERLAB convention?
That's correct.
To be an active member? John, you want to address?
Yeah, once.
I think that's it.
Once.
Yeah, we used to have a real stringent membership. We went through quite a knockdown, drag-out battle on what is required to become an active member of CALLERLAB. But I think John's right, just once now. It used to be once every 3 years, and then there was and there is even a requirement that you can fulfill that requirement while serving as in some capacity with your local Callers Association. Yeah, it used to be that you had to attend one convention every 3 years, and now the requirement is you attend once. We definitely have relaxed the requirements to attend CALLERLAB. It's been the general feeling that we wanted to be, instead of an exclusive organization, that we wanted to be an all-inclusive organization. One of the main things that CALLERLAB does and has always done is to provide caller education, continuing caller education. And I think you'll find when you come to the convention like this, if this is your first time, when you attend the various sessions, the speakers, the moderators, the panelists are willing to share anything they can. It's not where we try to withhold information. We're trying to share things because we want square dancing to be better. And we believe that by sharing information, by telling someone what this caller does and how this caller makes it work and how this caller makes that particular program work, by sharing that information, we make square dancing better. And I think that's one of the most valuable things I personally have found in CALLERLAB over the years, is that the people that were my heroes in square dance calling, the people that formed CALLERLAB and as a young caller, these people became my peers. And that's the best part of this activity, is that we all are all equal in this convention. We're all able to speak up at any particular session and say our piece. And at the same time, our peers and our heroes become our peers. And that's an important part of what CALLERLAB's all about.
Terry Lewis from Canada. Is there a link on the website to access past CALLERLAB convention or CALLERLAB conventions and some of the information that might have been given out to print it off at home?
I think probably our best link to past sessions would be through our Convention Tapes International, our tapes and our CDs, just most recently in MP3s. What a marvelous source, reference source for material and sessions. And John may be able to speak to his project with the Caller Training Committee.
In 1980, we had our first convention recorded by Convention Tapes International. And since that time, we've had tapes every year of all of the interest sessions have been recorded on tape recorder, and now including CDs and MP3s. We are in the process of reviewing the tapes for about a 20 to 25-year period called the Best of CALLERLAB, and so far the one that has been completed is the one on teaching. Originally, there were about 35 tapes on teaching in one way or another, and we narrowed those down to about 8 tapes, and that's since been transcribed down. I think there's a total of 4, which is going to be available probably at the end of this convention. So while the website doesn't actually have procedures of the conventions themselves, the tapes are there from the interest sessions, and they are still available from Convention Tapes International.
It's a valuable resource. The other thing is, as you go through this convention packet that lists all the sessions and the content in all these sessions that will be held during this convention, if you're here with your partner and you can make one session and your partner can make another, terrific. You can pick up that information. If you can't make a session, but there's something else you want to go to at the same time, and I think many of you will find that would be the case. If you can't make those sessions, pick up the tape or the CD or the MP3 from Convention Tapes International, and it gives you the ability to pick up that session and pick it up later on down the line. So,
some of you wonder whether it's worthwhile to go to a different session. The very first convention, 1974, you may or may not have heard of Vaughan Parrish. Vaughan Parrish was a very large man. His wife was very diminutive, a lovely grandmother. And this uproarious laughter came, and he says, well, I wonder what my wife said. Well, the answer was, what she said was, I don't care where a man puts his hand as long as he's gentle.
By the way, if you have not met John Kaltenthaler, John K. was one of our very first, was actually the 3rd executive secretary of CALLERLAB, but was the one that really took CALLERLAB from kind of the backdoor operation into a major operation. Now, this was still in his home. I think we invaded your home for how many years did we invade your home?
15 wonderful short years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my wife, Freddie, was the unpaid cleaning lady.
I'll tell you something else, but we went from a very small operation to a very tremendously large operation on through the whole onslaught of BMI and ASCAP, and so much of the organization, the credit for the organization early on goes to John Kaltenthaler and his wife Freddie. So they had a tremendous amount to do with that. Also, one of our most famous sayings that is still endearing to every convention here came from John. We still talk about it. John, please do us the honor.
No badge, no mail, no exceptions.
Remember that. You do not get anywhere without this badge. Wear it to bed, okay? Well, maybe not to bed now. But please, if you expect to eat, you need this badge. And it really helps to wear them to the sessions, and because so many of us from one year to the next change a little bit, so you might not recognize each other. And so wear that badge, okay? All right. Another thing that's in your packet I want to bring to your attention is this little special that goes to CALLERLAB members. And it's a special that's by American Square Dance Magazine that gives you the option of subscribing to American Square Dance Magazine. And let me tell you from a personal point of view that if you do not, for any reason, subscribe to this magazine as a caller, as a Square Dance caller, you should. This is kind of the Bible of our whole, this is our main magazine that covers the square dance activity in this country and abroad. And I think it really is important that you receive this, that you have your pulse on this, so when dancers ask you what's going on, you can tell them. I think it's really important to have that in the pulse of our activity. Your dancers will be much better glued to the activity when they not only take your local publication, but they take the publication that's the national publication. And there's always something in there for callers as well as dancers, round dance cuers, line dance instructors. There's good material in there. There's a great page that's been in there for a number of years on the easy dance programs by Bob Howell. Tremendous article in there. And I think there's something in there for everybody. And this is a neat opportunity. So pick it up yourself. Talk about it at your dances. Talk about it with your new dancers. Part of the glue that holds those dancers in is they realize this activity has a tremendous history and a tremendous heritage. And they realize that it's more than just going to the local dance down at the local school closer to their house. They realize what a huge part of the world that this activity encompasses. So this is a great offer, so pick up on that, okay? The other thing is there's a proposed change that we're considering at this convention that involves the basic program. That write-up is here in the convention packet. There's not only the proposed change, but there's the revision. There's another yellow copy on that that has a little bit of information back on it too, so look through that so you become at least indoctrinated to that particular part of this change in our program. The other thing is there's a vote card in your packet. You need that vote card on Wednesday when we make a vote. Okay, so bring that, just put it aside and bring it on Wednesday morning. We'll take a vote on this proposed change at that time, and then you'll need that vote card to place your vote. Okay? Any questions? Any comments? Terry, do you feel like you want to make a comment about the partners session? Yes. Oh, better yet, Janet's here. Yay! How about we like I said, we had a flight shift with Bev Sutter, so we have Janet Oliveri. Did I say that right? Janet Oliveri. How about a nice hand for our vice chairman of our partners committee, Janet Oliveri?
Hi, I'd like to welcome you all to CALLERLAB. This is our 8th year here. My 2nd year as vice chair of the Partners Committee. I apologize for being late. We were out sightseeing, and I just got back and got a message. We have 2 sessions for partners. The first one is at 3:30 on Monday. That is our committee meeting, and our project that we'd like to start this year, we've talked about for several years in the past, is the Partners Handbook. And it was written in the 80s. Was revised sometime in the 90s. We want to bring it into the 21st century. So, or we'd like to have as much input as possible, not just from the callers, but also the partners, but also from the callers. We need to know what the callers want their partners to do. The second thing is, our second meeting is 1:30 on Tuesday. That is our Partners Informal. That's where we get together and we talk about the concerns, the thoughts, the ideas that we as partners have. How can we contribute to the callers and also to the Square Dance program in general? So I'd like to invite everyone to come, partners and callers. If you're not in another session, please come and visit us. We'd be very happy to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. This is a great group, and much of the direction that the partners take depend upon the participation of the partners. So we really would like to strongly encourage our partners to attend the partner sessions and provide their input, because that group will work along with suggestions, and they really work, their work that they do comes from suggestions of the members.
One thing I'd like to point out, it's a partners session. There are women callers. There are men partners. You are welcome at these partner sessions, because they're just as important, are they not? More important in a lot of ways, because you get that strange male influence.
It's true, and they're hauling the equipment usually, aren't they?
Yep. They let us play.
There you go. Also, we have members from other organizations that are represented here at the CALLERLAB Convention, and this is really a unique opportunity for you as the caller to touch base and meet these people, because most of them are representatives of major organizations that have an influence on our activity. And one of the neat things that happens at this convention is a joint meeting with CALLERLAB representatives, representatives from the National Executive Committee, representatives from USDA, from Round-A-Lab, from CONTRA-Lab. There's representatives from other organizations, the campers, the National Gay and Lesbian Group. There's tremendous representation here from all the facets of our activity, and these representatives meet in a common meeting and talk about some of the things of mutual interest. And as most of you know, square dancing is at the crest of a real change. I mean, we're really looking at where our activity will be 10 and 20 years down the line. And this organization was founded on founded by visionaries who said, you know, we need to look at our activity and decide how we can make this thing carry on in the years to come. And we need to look at where this activity is now and evaluate it and where it's going to be 10 and 20 years down the line. And I think most of you in your local areas know that there is a change that needs to be. There's a shift that we need to make in order to carry this activity along further for our children and their children and on down the line. This activity, if you look back over the years, has evolved tremendously. When you look back at the times of Pappy Shaw, the way we danced, the type of music that we had back then, the type of music that we have today, the type of choreography we have today, the way our dance evolved from visiting couples, where the first old couple lead out to the right and later on the lady and the gent so low, and our activity has changed then. We are due for another shift, and I think this is the organization from a calling standpoint that can look out there and see where we might be able to go. Last year we had a major shift in our program policy, which encouraged experimentation of easy or learn-to-dance programs, introduction programs to bring dancers into our activity in whatever form. And maybe even by a different name, maybe even by a different type of costume, whatever that takes to bring the dancers in to see how this activity could move forward and more positively. How could we bring this activity to age groups that we don't have anymore, or that they're not part of our activity presently? What other things should we be doing? Should we be dancing in different venues than we are dancing now? Should we dance in places that are not churches, that are not senior centers, that are not schools? Or, I mean, where should we be going? And I think that's one of the things you're going to see at this convention, because the theme of this convention this year is outside the square. And there are sessions that are tailored to that particular theme. We're going to look outside the box a little bit, and we talked about that a lot over the last several years. And I think we're going to need to look outside the box a little bit. Can we grow our activity as it is now, or can we get new people in a whole different way? And I think that's one of the questions that you're going to see at this convention. And I'm frankly excited about it. I think this has always been an organization that's had to look a little bit ahead, and we've got a range of organizations now, an alliance of organizations called the Arts Alliance that is currently in the process of looking ahead and looking to see where we can take this activity. So I'm excited about that. I think there's a tremendous opportunity here if we look at it the right way. And although we seem to at times get bogged down on the definitions and on the timing and on this and that and the other, there's a big view out there, a big area out there to look for, and I think we got a good opportunity at this convention to start that. That's the theme of this convention, and it's a great way to kick that out. Any questions? Any more questions about CALLERLAB, about the sessions, about... Maybe I can speak to... We have a session here on Monday night that we're actually emceeing a dance by brand new callers. Now, this is a first at the CALLERLAB convention, and I'm kind of excited because we've got callers here that have been calling less than 5 years, and we're going to give them the opportunity to call. And I don't know about most of you, but we sit in meetings most of the time that we're here, and we might get up and wander to the back of the room and maybe wander between rooms and what have you, but it's really nice in the evening times to have something that's a dance, and we do have some dance sessions scheduled in the evening. Tomorrow night, I believe there's the new caller dance, and there's also the contra and traditional dance that will be occurring at the same time. So again, if you've never experienced contras or traditional dancing, you've got a unique opportunity to do that at this convention. I believe also on Tuesday night, if I'm looking at this right, we have contras with... How do they describe that this year? Last year we called them zesty contras. I think it's close to that. We have a dance that's outside the square. It's the theme dance called Outside the Square. And we're looking for different type of things like horsing around. There's various gimmicks. There's elastic squares. Now, I've been calling for 43 years now, and I've never heard of elastic squares. So I'm excited to see about that. I mean, and I think there's some neat things that we can look at with that session. There's also a session on alternative music, and I know most of you realize that there's a lot more music out there. We're just kind of at that point in dancing where there's tremendous opportunities to use different types of music. And how do you handle that? How do you use that tastefully so that the dancers can have fun with it and that you're not overburdening them with music? It was interesting. One of the previous sessions, one of our callers said, you have to watch some of this kind of music because some of it's like Chinese water torture. It's like a drop of water hitting you in the forehead. And I think it really describes some of that music out there is a little strange, and you have to use it with some taste. But that's always been a great session, this one alternative music contra. Or this is alternative music contra. There are alternative music sessions at the convention. But I attended that one myself last year, and dancing traditional contras to alternative music is quite interesting. So again, tomorrow night there's a couple activities there. Critique sheets. Please fill out the critique sheets. The executive committee literally reads every critique sheet that comes in from the convention, from the complaint about the food to the complaint about the pillows to the complaints about, and they ask your suggestions for interest sessions coming up in the next year's convention. All of those are taken into consideration, so please.
Excuse me, Mike. You don't have to complain about anything.
Absolutely.
You can say nice things in your critique as well.
Absolutely. That helps in planning additional sessions and in selecting additional hotels, knowing that people like multiple pillows on your bed versus there are a lot of pillows on these beds, isn't there? I mean, aren't they amazing? I mean, it's like whew. Unbelievable. How many just got here and have not slept on that bed yet? How many? Just raise your hand if you haven't slept. There's a ton of pillows. You got to start out, Yeah. Well, that's right. You might have to toss a few off. And I think there's some additional ones underneath the television in the other room. So check it. If you need more, hey, have more. Yes. Oh, is that right? You making them?
We make them. This is the pillow making state of the country.
I love it.
That's why they're on the beds.
I love it. Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Gene. Very good. Oh, this reminds me, just to go a little farther, Gene and Connie are here from the NEC, and I want to make sure that you get a chance to introduce yourself to members of the NEC and also members of the convention group that will be from the coming conventions, whether it's in San Antonio, North Carolina, or Kansas. Yeah, Wichita. So, those groups will be represented here, and it's always nice to get the chance to get to know those people.
What's the NEC, Mike?
NEC, good question. It's the National Executive Committee. It's a committee and a group made out of the past chairman of the previous National Square Dance Conventions. Okay? And this group runs those conventions, oversees them. They're in charge of the what do you call them? The SIPs, Standard Operating Procedures. SOPs, the guidelines for all the coming conventions, and they have over the years sought input from CALLERLAB as well as other organizations on how to improve their convention. And so, again, this gives you some good if you have some questions about the national convention, or you have some questions about the coming conventions, these are the people to talk to. Okay. It's been said that CALLERLAB is a organization of good old boys, and while there are a lot of us that have been involved in CALLERLAB for a lot of years, most of the work is done behind the scenes by our CALLERLAB members as part of the committees. That is such an integral part of what CALLERLAB does, and there is a board of governors that tends to move and change over the years. There are some board members that have been there a while, but there's also always new board members coming on and new portions of our activity that are represented on that board and that are represented by our committees and by the chairman and the vice chairman of those committees. And so it's very easy to become part of this and to become part of the committee structure and be a vice chairman or chairman. We're always looking for people. If you have a particular talent in a particular area or you have a particular passion for part of our activity and can offer something in the sense of doing a session in the future or an interest session, we'd love to hear from you. We're always looking for new people to become involved in CALLERLAB. So we invite you to come forward, talk to the people at the registration area, talk to any of the Board of Governors members. They have these little ribbons on there, and you can touch base with them. And we'd like to hear from you. We really would. John, I think anything else to add to that? Any other questions? It's interesting that maybe I have something else I could add here. Very often we call, and if you wear your CALLERLAB badge at a dance, you might be asked about CALLERLAB. And it's my personal opinion that CALLERLAB's a real easy organization to blame things on. It's really easy because a lot of our dancers and many callers don't remember what it was like before CALLERLAB. And as Martin mentioned, before CALLERLAB, you went to a dance and you hopefully could dance everything that was called at that dance. But if you went to another dance down the road the next night, it could be a completely different set of calls that were at that dance. And at the time CALLERLAB was formed, it was to try to get some organization, try to make some sense out of the chaos that was occurring in this activity. And it was formed by some real visionaries at the time and real leaders across the country. And so one of the really big things that was done by CALLERLAB in the early years was to establish some continuity, to have programs that you could go any place and dance. And then, of course, we had styling, and we had to make some sense out of styling. And what was interesting is that all those years that we fought over styling, and John, you probably have some good stories about styling and some of the occurrences in the foyers of CALLERLAB, because a lot of the discussions go right out there in the hallway, and we go back and forth and battle about things. But the bottom line is, when the vote comes down, you go with what the majority agrees, and you go forward and you go on. Now, very often we still have some differences in opinion, and those of you who dance in maybe the Northwest dance ocean waves a lot differently than they do, say, down in Alabama and Georgia and that kind of thing. We finally, after a lot of years, realized that there's going to be regional differences in our styling, and that there's some things we're just not going to be able to totally dictate and change. And CALLERLAB is not a dictating organization. We make suggestions, we make recommendations, but you can't dictate some things. There's parts of our history and parts of our heritage that you're just not going to change. And that's one of the things that we've done. John, do you want to make a comment?
Have you considered having votes on certain items maybe 2 or 3 years in a row before it's passed rather than changing it back and forth?
Most of the items that are considered over a 2 or 3 year period. I mean, the discussions have taken places in the committees and on the boardroom floor for 2 or 3 years before that happens. The input that comes in takes a while to get that idea through. And so most of the decisions by CALLERLAB, unlike the early years when you could make a motion on Wednesday morning and get it right out in front of the General Assembly, we now have a process where those motions come before the entire membership of CALLERLAB before it's actually considered and voted on a Wednesday morning meeting.
That is one thing about CALLERLAB that we've learned, that we can't make a snap decision. We're talking about the change back to using BASIC. That has been discussed for the last 3 years within the board, within the committees, and there's been 2 sides have come up. And that's what's going to be presented to you as members. Now, there'll be a vote here. It might be a binding vote, but I don't think it will because we haven't got enough people here. So what will happen with that vote, it will be emailed out to all the members of CALLERLAB to vote on. You'll get the chance to say, hey, yes or no. And you'll have the chance to think about it. What you think is what we want. If you get a letter asking you to vote, this is not a civil election. You have the right to vote, and we really want you to vote. We have been disappointed at times of the numbers of CALLERLAB members who do not vote. And I hope you are not one of those. That's why you're being asked. We want your opinion. Voting is a privilege. It's not something you discard. And I really mean that. Because how can we make a just decision if you don't tell us what you want? I was going to say one thing before I got into this, shall we say, discussion. In 1974, you got to picture this, in the lobby of that hotel we were in, you've got to picture 6 tall Texans in a square, males, and 2 or 3 short fellows like me, trying to figure out which way we should courtesy turn, which way we should be in ocean waves. And there were people coming in from the street who were also in that hotel, and here we are, a bunch of men holding hands in the air, and we'd say swing through, and they'd look at us, and they'd make a mad dash for the elevator. It was comical to watch, but yet when that was going on, we were solving a problem. We didn't solve it that year. We didn't solve it the next year. It took us, what, about 5 years before that thing got sorted out. But it was interesting to watch the effect it had on the public. I think we drove a lot of dancers away at that point.
It's true. It's true. Well, listen, we have a session that immediately follows this that is our talent show. And you can choose to sit right there and hold on to those prime seats. It starts at 9:15. You're all invited, and that will conclude the sessions for this evening. We start bright and early at the opening session tomorrow at 9 a.m. Breakfast is not included in the package tomorrow. That starts afterwards. A lot of our members still are yet to come in. Some of them will come into the crack of dawn tomorrow morning to start the session. But 9 a.m. and I believe that's going to be in right in this room here. And we'll have the opening session. A lot of the questions about the convention that we haven't covered in here will be answered at that time. And if you have any questions at any time, or any comments, or any input you'd like to give us, we'd love to hear from you. Okay? All right, very good, John. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Martin, thank you very much. And thank you for attending. All right, don't forget, 9:15 in this room, okay? All right, very good. Thank you.